Alright, I'm working on making a end table from an end cut log, and this here is the test piece. There are two things I wanted to test with the epoxy pour on this one. The first was if you pour epoxy and then sand it with 220 grit and then pour a second layer, if it does clear up with all the scratches going away. The second being that somebody had mentioned if you poured epoxy to fill like some of these cracks and it overflowed a little bit onto the edges, if you sanded it and then poured a second layer, you might get discoloration between the first pour and the second. So I'm going to check those two things out. The first thing you can see here is I did sand this section and then poured a second layer here, and it does clear up really nicely, and you can see all the wood grain again, looks good. The second thing I did, I poured along here first, this pour this way was second. You can see here like the color between the two is the same. The thing you may notice is a slight white outline that did happen between the two pours, and that could just be that I didn't clean the wood good enough and it pushed sawdust along. I'm not quite sure on that one. It is pretty faint, so it's something to keep an eye out for. Maybe sand it better next time. But I think for the most part you're safe pouring two different layers across different sections. And yeah, so I'm going to move on to my actual piece. This is just a test piece. So here's the actual piece. You can see it also has a split in it. So what I was trying to do here is pour some epoxy down into the cracks that kind of went through the center, so that I knew that they got filled before I carried on with doing a seal coat on the top. I used this aluminum ducting tape. I just heard from one guy on YouTube that I saw that it holds its shape better and it's pretty sticky. So this just finished curing for 24 hours, so I'm going to peel this off and see how it turned out there. Alright, here's this, the final piece that I was going to be working on, and it looks like I did a pretty good job filling in these cracks in the center section here. So hopefully that'll help without it all leaking out the bottom as I pour a seal coat. Obviously I'll have to do some sanding here to clean this up before I do a seal coat, but I think that turned out pretty good. So the next step will be sanding everything with 220, getting it all cleaned up, and then I'll be doing a seal coat on this top part, and I'll be painting on the bark at the same time. And I will have to tape the bottom because these gaps in the bark do go all the way through, so I'll have to tape up around the bottom so it doesn't leak out, and hopefully it will absorb a whole bunch and I won't have to do too many seal coats. Alright, the piece is ready for the first seal coat, hopefully the only seal coat. The plan is going to be to first put kind of a line around on the bark for the gaps for it to start soaking in there, then drizzle some onto the different cracks so it can start soaking in, and then start pouring and spreading on the top. After that I'm going to start painting the bark on the side with a brush, and we'll see how that goes. So here it is with the first seal coat just put on. You can see it's already absorbing really quick into the bark, so I might have to do a second seal coat. But it's looking kind of shiny. Painting the bark took a little bit more than I thought, so it's running out quick, but it is dripping off the sides. So I think that's a good sign that I got a lot in there. So now I'm going to go over with the torch a couple times to knock out any bubbles and just keep checking back on it. I ended up doing 2 seal coats on this because it kept sinking into all the cracks, especially on the bark side. But I am still going to sand it down and do a flood coat later on. You can see even after all that, there's a little bit of a divot there, and on this one, and over here as well. But I'm hoping that they're sealed up enough that on the flood coat they will fill in nicely. Otherwise, the bark's looking good, nice and shiny, kind of looks like it's wet all the time. Next step is going to be flipping it over, peeling the tape off, sanding the bottom a little bit, and then doing a seal coat on the bottom. I want the final coat to be the flood coat, so that if anything happens when I'm sealing up the bottom, I can always sand it off up here. Here's the bottom all taped up. Got all these cool little icicles that I get to sand off. That'll be exciting. We'll see what's under the tape. Well, the tape did not come off as nicely as I had hoped. Some of it's stuck under there, but hopefully the sanding will take care of that. You can see there's still some huge gaps in this bark on the underside, which my hope is that because I've sealed the top, I can fill these and nothing will come out the other side. So that will be next step, is sanding, and then I'll probably just do a coat where I'm just focusing on the cracks on the bark to try to get those filled in. Did some sanding, got most of that stuff off. This is the bottom, so I'm not as concerned about how it looks. I am a little concerned about the pour leaking out the sides of this thing, but I guess we're just gonna find out on that one. So next step is to try to fill in these big gaps. So I did the pour along the edges. You can see it's already even there sinking down, and I had that brimmed to the top even here. So I think I might even have to do this a second time. This one couldn't even get to fill up. It just kept sucking in and I ran out. So yeah, the only thing I did notice was that apparently there's a couple holes in the side of the bark, like over here. You see that drip right there? It's leaking out of the side of the bark somewhere up here, which is unfortunate because it's going to keep dropping the level. But hopefully it'll dry up, and then my next fill, that hole will be plugged up. Oh, okay, this is back to the top after the final flood coat. It turned out pretty good. There is some dust in there. I don't really know how to prevent that. Put a dust cover on and everything. But overall, looks nice. I'll have to sand some drips off the bottom. The bottom took 3 coats, so I had to do 2 different coats to fill in the cracks around the edges, and then one kind of thick coat on the top. You saw me pouring that in the last section of the video, I think. And then now this is the final flood coat, and it is finished being sealed. Thank goodness. It only took 6 coats total between the top and bottom. The next part of the video, I'm going to be working on how to attach the legs. Alrighty, on to the legs. So I decided to go with these hairpin style legs, but as you can see, I welded them all together to form a square, except for there, because that's going to go on either side of the crack. My thought process was that because I couldn't put those bow ties in to hold the crack together, if I welded this all together, it would act as kind of a set of bow ties holding the piece together in case it tried to move it all. And then you wouldn't have all the, the piece is just kind of sitting on top. You wouldn't have all the forces pushing on the legs in different spots because the wood's pretty soft. So that's what I'm working on there. So here I marked out the corners and I have my holes drilled. I'm going to be using these inserts, threaded inserts, to hold everything in. My plan is to put some glue on the threads of these, put them in, and hopefully that will hold everything together nicely. All the threaded inserts are done, and I got a little bit of paint on this thing to make it look slightly nicer. As per usual, my Holes didn't line up, so I had to do a lot of massaging of the holes on this thing. But I think it'll all fit in the end. And here it is, all done. Turned out pretty good, I think. The legs look alright. So overall, a pretty fun project. It did take longer than I thought, for sure. The pouring of the epoxy over and over again, plus the sanding, was a little more time consuming, but pretty fun project overall, and you can definitely do it in your house.